with Alabama State Auditor Andrew Sorrell. So you made national news last week with the situation. Well, what specifically did you do? Can you explain what you did and what prompted you to do that with Bitcoin in Alabama?
Well, I came out and I called for Alabama to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And I was a little surprised. I knew it would be state news when I did it. I was interviewed by 1819 News on the topic. And I talk about crypto. Anytime there's crypto legislation moving in Alabama or crypto news, a lot of times the media will approach me because they know when I was in the state legislature here, I carried some crypto legislation trying to exempt crypto from ad valorem taxation back in 2021. Although the effort was unsuccessful on the floor, it was one of the best debates we've ever had on the floor of the Alabama House. But anyway, ever since that point 3 years ago, the media a lot of times will question me, my thoughts on crypto or whatever. And of course, it's been in the news lately. So I knew it would make state news. What I did not expect was that it would be picked up by Cointelegraph and all these other media outlets kind of around the country. And I honestly, I really didn't anticipate that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, back to the topic, I do think Alabama should create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It makes sense.
And why do you think that they should do that? Like, why do you believe that Bitcoin is a good store of value for the state of Alabama?
Well, the state of Alabama has all of our assets in dollar denominated assets. And I think that's risky. And I believe in the principles of diversification. With personal investing, I think the state should be the same way. And although I'm not, predicting the demise of the dollar, not in the immediate short term anyway, over the long term, the dollar has gone down, right? I mean, it's lost 99% of its purchasing power, and the trend continues to be down. And Bitcoin has been the exact opposite. And what we have is a $3 trillion asset class in cryptocurrency that the state of Alabama has absolutely no exposure to. And so I don't think we're very well diversified.
Okay, so $3 trillion. So do you believe that like within the next 5, 6 years it's gonna actually rise so I'm just trying to see if like gauge the reason that you think beyond going to the future, you think that it's a good investment for Alabama as well, because there are a lot of volatility concerns, right? The price could go to zero in theory, right?
Well, anytime you have a new and kind of emerging asset class, the price is going to be volatile. And look back in the 1990s with the emergence of the internet and how many of the .com companies went bankrupt. In 1999, there was a group of 30 or 40 of them that were collectively worth $1.7 trillion dollars. And those companies no longer even exist today. They went completely bust in the .com burst. That didn't mean that the internet wasn't a good innovation and that it wasn't here to stay. So is there going to be price volatility? Of course there is. And also notice that I called for Alabama to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I didn't say a strategic altcoin reserve. I didn't say
Fair
speculative
enough.
meme coins. I didn't say any of that. We're not buying NFTs, right? I said a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I think Bitcoin has established itself. It's here to stay. We're no longer talking about even, I hesitate to even call it an emerging asset class anymore because it's so well established now. We are talking about something that has exceeded the market capitalization of all the silver in the world. Bitcoin just exceeded silver, $1.7 trillion dollars. I mean,
Yep.
we're again, it's if you look at the largest assets in the world, Bitcoin is in the top 10. It's closing in on gigantic corporations like Nvidia. Gold's market cap is another, I don't know, 4 or 5x higher from here, maybe slightly more than that. But anyway, it's within reach for Bitcoin in the next 10 to 15 years, I believe. So I do believe the price, and again, this is not financial advice. This is Andrew Sorrell's personal opinion here, okay? But I believe that Bitcoin is going to continue increasing in value, or I wouldn't be calling for Alabama to create a strategic reserve in Bitcoin.
Okay, so I travel around the country and I lobby for Bitcoin policy and for states like Alabama to adopt strategic Bitcoin reserves. So it's really difficult, especially with, I'm not going to try to be ageist or anything, but with older legislators, especially like in the state where I'm at right now, trying to do the same thing, Rhode Island, they don't understand it and they really don't want to bother to understand it. And every time that somebody goes in there to like speak on it, testify, it seems like the state legislators are more confused afterwards than anything. So in Alabama, have you had trouble getting legislative support for it, or what's the situation with that?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, when I introduced the legislation I mentioned earlier about exempting cryptocurrency from ad valorem taxation, I was trying to explain to people like we don't tax cash in your bank account, so we shouldn't tax crypto on a ad valorem, which is a property tax. You would never tax Bitcoin just sitting in somebody's digital wallet if you don't tax their cash in the bank. That's all the bill did. We don't currently tax it. This is preemptive. I was worried the politicians would say, "Ooh, there's something new we could tax." So I was trying to preemptively say, "No, we're not going to ad valorem tax Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies." And really struggled to explain it to people because on the floor, I remember when we were getting debated, this legislator comes up there and he says, So this Bitcoin company now that you're talking about, and I said, Bitcoin's not a company. Like, what do you mean? Like, he had no concept of what we were
Just didn't
talking.
understand that there's no CEO, there's no physical address, there's no headquarters, right?
That's right. So he said, okay, so where did it come from? And I said, well, it was created by Satoshi Nakamoto. He goes, who's that? Well, we don't really know. And he goes, oh, so you're wanting us to pass a bill about Bitcoin and we don't even know who created it, where it came from. And it's a little, I granted, it's a little bit hard to explain, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have value. Like, as I said in my interview with 1819 News, the debate over whether or not Bitcoin will succeed is over. It has ended. It ended a long time ago. And the people who want to put their hands over their ears and say la la la, or just as legislators say, I don't understand it, so my vote's going to be no. You know what? Your job as a legislator is to understand it. When people elect you as their representative, they don't expect you to be an expert on every topic. I was a business guy. All right. So if we had a bill come up on, let's say the medical industry, or if we had some kind of complex legal bill come up, we relied on the people in the legislature who knew something about the medicine industry, medical industry, or who were attorneys in our caucus
Makes
for advice.
sense.
And interestingly, when Bitcoin came up, which was kind of in my wheelhouse, I've been in crypto for 6 or 7 years now. I didn't feel like I got that same deference. Everyone said, we don't understand it, so our vote's going to be no. And I'm like, okay, well, you were elected by 48,000 people in your district to research and understand issues and make intelligent decisions. Because I guarantee you, a whole bunch of the people in your district do own Bitcoin. They do own cryptocurrency, and they're probably disappointed in you right now as a legislator.
So public perception in Alabama, the like you said, legislators are there to represent their constituents. Is there a big constituency? I mean, from your personal experience, is there like a big enough constituency to lobby for this push in Alabama right now?
Let me
From
tell
the
you how
public
we
perception,
know.
citizen public perception wise side.
Yeah, let me tell you how we know that there's a big constituency, because you saw both Joe Biden and Donald Trump making a play during the presidential election to get the cryptocurrency vote. And it's no longer 18 to 24-year-olds. I mean, people in their 30s and 40s own crypto now. There's a bunch of grandparents who own crypto now. I
My
gave
mom
my
does too, by the way. I helped her buy crypto last week. Not financial advice, but go ahead.
There you go. I mean, my father-in-law, for their birthdays a couple years ago, I gave them cryptocurrency. I gave them some Cardano, and they have really enjoyed watching it go up and down and sideways. And I remember it dipped down to something like 30 cents, and then just a month or two later, it was at $1.20. Like, what happened? And I was like, that's honestly not surprising at all for crypto. That's just kind of.
It's very different as well, right? The stock market doesn't really do have that volatility, those big 20 to 30% jumps. Sorry, I'll go ahead and continue.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, what did we see this year? We saw politicians making a play for the cryptocurrency segment of the vote. How did Joe Biden do it? Well, I believe that he twisted the arm of Gary Gensler to get him to approve the Ethereum and Bitcoin ETFs. The Bitcoin
I
ETF was
agree.
January, and then a few months later, the Ethereum ETF. I don't think the SEC wanted to approve either of those, but by a 3-2 vote, they approved them both. I think they were likely getting pressure from the Biden administration, like, man, if we vote no on approving these ETFs, all those votes are going to Donald Trump. Then what did you see in September? You saw Donald Trump at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville saying, we are going to establish the American Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, and we are going to keep the 207,000 Bitcoins that the United States government has acquired through seizures. We're going to keep those, and we're going to add more to our stack. And Cynthia Loomis out in, I think, Wyoming, the senator there has proposed buying another 4% of the Bitcoin supply, which would be about $80 billion to add to America's stack. So the fact that politicians on both sides of the aisle are making a play for the crypto vote lets you know how big it's built. And we're talking about an industry now that has 500 million people worldwide that own Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies.
Did not know that.
It's one in every
So,
16 world own crypto.
so I need you to help me out here, okay? So I'm in Rhode Island, like I said, and I'm between Rhode Island and New York trying to lobby for policies. I know your sales pitch is for Alabama, but how would you pitch this to people in Rhode Island and New York who are very apprehensive to adopting pro crypto legislation, especially in New York State with the BIT license, right? Um, I actually had to unstake some cryptocurrency because I was forced to because New York State policy says I can no longer stake. So obviously, like if I'm living in a place like New York State, I'm going to want to move to Alabama or Texas, right, where you guys are really pushing these laws. What would be your sales pitch to people in those states that are against
You
it?
you've got to make it about economic development. You've got to make it about bringing jobs and industry. So one of the things I said in my interview with 1819 News was that the state that is first to move and adopts a good tax jobs and industry to their state. And if you make it about economic development and say Alabama's about to steal the jobs that Rhode Island could have, and look, you can go stake your cryptocurrency in Alabama and earn a yield. You can't do that in New York or Rhode Island or wherever. I mean, that's the best argument. I remember when I was working on some legislation to get rid of the sales tax on precious metals in Alabama a few years ago. We were renewing its sales tax exemption and trying to talk to people about constitutional money and gold and silver and stuff. Honestly, legislators' eyes kind of glazed over. They didn't care. When I explained that coin shows wouldn't come to Alabama if we charged sales tax and other people didn't, suddenly they cared and the bill sailed through. So I think you pitch it as economic development.
Also, I'm going to help you. So what I say I can is get the, the Bitcoin conference every year, the one that you just said President Trump had attended this year in Tennessee, and next year's in Vegas. Maybe in 2026 we get to have it in Alabama. I would love to have a reason to go to Alabama. Just FYI.
Love that idea, and try to get me a speaking spot if you're successful with that, would you?
Definitely. And also, so like people are scared of it because they think that it exists like in the internet in the middle of nowhere, right? With banks, even though you don't actually have physical cash, just digits right on a computer, people know that their feel that their money's safe in a bank. How would Alabama go about? Because how would you guys go about explaining to people custodianship and how it works? And would you guys have your own crypto wallet, your own for Maxville, or would you guys have like a custodian like Coinbase or a third party hold your cryptocurrency or Bitcoin
This,
rather?
this is
Sorry.
a great. The state treasurer and I had this very discussion last week when I was in his office, and I was kind of pitching this idea to him. And I said, "Look, it's easier than ever to own cryptocurrency." So I'm kind of a purist. Like the way that I own my cryptos is I own them on a hardware wallet disconnected from the internet. That I have the seed word, my seed words split up and put all over the place. And I know how to own crypto. Now, for the state of Alabama, somebody would have to hold the crypto keys. And unfortunately, the nature of politics is that there's turnover. So
It could
you
be
wouldn't.
you. I think you're a pretty trustworthy person. Just saying.
Well, thank you. We are bonded, but the problem is that when I leave office, well, then I still have the seed words, or maybe I copied them down, and now the next auditor or treasurer has them. So I can see that being a big problem. The easier way to own it would just be to use the new SEC approved ETFs. The state of Alabama, just as easily as you could purchase equities, you could purchase Bitcoin or Ethereum ETFs through a stock brokerage account. That would be the easiest way.
So the state of Alabama is going to be owning ETFs. They're not going to be actually owning the actual asset itself. Why do you think it's better? Do you think it's easier to own the ETF versus own the actual asset itself?
It's definitely easier. There's no question it's easier. It's easier to buy. That's why they passed the ETFs. Now, is that the way I prefer to hold it? No, I would always prefer to hold your own keys, not your keys, not your crypto. But it kind of depends on how much we have. And if you have enough, then you can come up with some kind of self custody strategy for it. What I'm trying to do, my first goal is to get Alabama to just buy one Bitcoin. And if we buy one Bitcoin, you're not gonna set up some kind of system to hold that yourselves. You're just going to buy it through an ETF. That would be the easiest thing. Ultimately, I like Texas has their own depository for gold, for instance. I love that idea. So would I want Alabama to do that in the future as a way to store our own Bitcoin? Yes, I would, but it wouldn't make sense until we owned enough to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, because Texas legislature just introduced a bill to begin the process to open a strategic reserve. So do you
I
think
saw
that
that.
Alabama? Yeah. So how do you think that affect? How does that affect your pitch for Alabama? Does that help you out, or does that like is that a negative or positive with regards to you
I think
selling?
you're seeing Texas. I think Pennsylvania and Florida are also talking about they have similar legislation being introduced there. So, I mean, we're really on the cutting edge here. And after my interview came out, I did have a legislator in Alabama reach out to me and say, "Are you working with anybody on this piece of legislation, or could I carry it?" And I said, "Man, I'd be happy to work with you." So there may be a bill introduced in Alabama here. Our legislative session starts first Tuesday in February. You may see a bill introduced to that effect. There's also a couple other great legislators here that are very crypto friendly. Interestingly, one's a Democrat and one's a Republican, and
As
it's
it should
Philip
be.
Enns. It is. This is not really a partisan issue. Philip Ensler is the Democrat. Mike Shaw is the Republican. Mike Shaw is from the Birmingham area. Really, really smart guy. When you talk crypto with him, he knows his stuff. He's not just somebody who bought some Bitcoin on Coinbase. Okay, this guy really understands the industry, how it works, staking, mining. He can talk at a very, very deep level. And he is carrying some crypto legislation. He's working with Eric Peterson's Satoshi Action Fund. And he's been carrying some legislation for him, which so far has not been successful. But they did get a Bitcoin study commission passed last year. and that report's supposed to be, it's due back to the legislature in about a year. So maybe that was a first step.
Definitely. So environmental concerns. A reason that New York has a quarrel with Bitcoin specifically and other cryptocurrencies is because the proof of work mechanism, right? A lot of people say that mining cryptocurrency has a negative impact on the environment, and by buying Bitcoin, a state like Alabama is adding to that negative impact. How would you combat that argument?
There's a couple ways. First, though, first of all, I'm a Bitcoin miner myself. I own and operate 5 Bitcoin mining rigs, so I'm very familiar with this. They happen to be hosted in Texas. They're at a facility in Texas. I pay them a fee, and when Texas had their problems where they were having blackouts and whatnot, they turned off the Bitcoin miners. So for about 6 weeks, we weren't mining any Bitcoin, which was unfortunate. But you don't want people freezing in their houses because you're mining Bitcoin. So I understand that. As far as the energy waste, like in Alabama, I don't know if this is probably not the case in New York, but we're on the TVA system down here for our electricity in North Alabama. We have the system of dams along the Tennessee River with the Tennessee Valley Authority. So a lot of our power is hydroelectric, uh, which means water is always flowing through the river, right? So sometimes you're producing more energy than you need, or you're just letting water run over the spillways and you're not running it through to produce energy because you don't need it. So I think an interesting idea would be, what if rather than just letting that water pass by our dam and not create any electricity, what if we were using that to mine Bitcoin? And then we took that Bitcoin and just kept it as part of our strategic reserve. In other words, we're almost getting the energy for free because it's excess energy we wouldn't have used anyway. And that doesn't, hydroelectric doesn't harm the environment at all. It's just water. Water is going to run downstream whether we mine Bitcoin or not. So that's one way I would counter the argument in Alabama. And that'd be a great way, very low cost way for us to build up an Alabama strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Definitely, because I heard that Texas is actually not using state funds; they're getting basically donations from high net worth individuals. And what you're doing, like saying, like I think they have a situation with petroleum where, like, when the flare system, when they're flaring, I forgot what it's called. Maybe you know better than I do. But when they're drilling for oil, there's flares, and they can use that energy as well for mining Bitcoin, then basically putting in the strategic reserve.
Yeah, no, that's very, I hadn't heard of that.
Okay, so taxation. So do you believe that people are going to be able to pay for government services and pay their? I'm not sure if you guys have state income tax, right?
We do, yes.
Okay, pay for
Unfortunately,
state. It's okay. It's worse up here. It's worse in New York and California, trust me. So anyway, do you think people will be
at
able to
least we have
pay?
Alabama. Our property taxes are about lowest in the nation.
That's good too. I might move there. Who knows? If you guys adopt the Bitcoin strategic reserve, who knows? Maybe I will. Anyway, so do you think that it's possible for people in the future to be able to pay their income taxes and their really, really small property taxes with Bitcoin?
I don't see why that shouldn't be possible. We ought to make it easy to pay your taxes, and there's probably a system where somebody could pay in Bitcoin and immediately gets converted to dollars. I mean, that would be pretty simple to set up. Or my preference would be, if people pay in Bitcoin, great. Let's just keep that as part of our strategic Bitcoin reserve. Why not? It wouldn't be that hard for the state to set this kind of stuff up. And I don't understand the reluctance to do it. And this strategic Bitcoin reserve I'm calling for, I'm not saying Alabama should take $10 billion and buy Bitcoin. What I'm saying, like, first of all, can we just buy one Bitcoin? Can we at least get the ball rolling on this? And then can we just dollar cost average our way into it over time? Bitcoin is running up. I mean, nobody wanted it when it was $15,300 a year and a half ago. It was in the toilet. Sam Bankman-Fried was going to jail. I mean, everything, all the news was negative. Nobody wanted to talk about or buy Bitcoin. That was the time to be buying Bitcoin. I was buying Bitcoin on
Definitely.
Ethereum when Ethereum was at $1,200 and just sat there for months at a time. I was dollar cost averaging my way in my personal portfolio. So should Alabama run out right now and dump $1 billion in $107,000 Bitcoin? I don't know. Like, for the long term, that'd probably be fine. For the short term, you never know when Bitcoin's going to suffer a 50% price correction. I think a better strategy is dollar cost averaging your way in over time. I said this in the interview. Just say we're going to buy some. It's kind of the Michael Saylor approach, micro strategy. We're going to buy Bitcoin. We don't really care what the price is, but every couple months we're going to buy some more Bitcoin. I think that's
In
the
the
way to do
past
it.
month, he's been buying every Monday, every Monday morning.
Well, Peter Schiff pointed that out yesterday. He said, "Well, it's another Monday, fourth Monday in a row that Bitcoin is up, probably because Michael Saylor is buying again." Well, then it came out, yes, Michael Saylor bought another 15,000 Bitcoin. I'm like, Peter, if you know this is happening, if you know there's a billionaire that's going to be out there buying Bitcoin every Monday and you refuse to benefit from it because you don't believe in it, you're just stupid. Like at some point, even if you just wanted to trade it, it would make sense if you see a pattern develop to get in. But the non-believers like Peter Schiff, I mean, eventually they're just going to miss out. But, interestingly,
Definitely.
Peter 18-year-old son bought Bitcoin and he was making fun of him. And Bitcoin was at $20,000. He said, you should have bought gold. Well, you know what? I believe in gold and silver too. Gold has done very well the last year. I own Gold Guns and Guitars. I own two gun stores, pawn shops here in Alabama. The price of gold has done very, very well the last year. Hadn't done near as well as Bitcoin.
Yep. So you just said it correctly that 2 years ago, a year ago, people didn't really want Bitcoin. The mainstream media wasn't really talking about it. It was a scam. What lessons have you learned from places like El Salvador and other nation states? I believe it was, I forget which other country, Bahrain, I believe also has a Bitcoin strategic reserve. What lessons have you learned from like El Salvador and Bahrain that you basically you could implement in your pitch for Alabama to have the strategic reserve going to the future?
Well, unfortunately, this stuff only gets talked about when Bitcoin's price is going up. So,
Yep.
hard to believe that they only care now that Bitcoin's at six figures. I mean, honestly, would I have gotten the article? Would I've gotten the coverage I did if Bitcoin was at $20,000 and I called for this? No, nobody would care. Nobody would be talking about it. And that's kind of sad. And when did El Salvador adopt Bitcoin? They adopted it in the last big bull run. And then what happened? The price dropped from 69,000 to 15,300, and everybody was making fun of El Salvador for a couple of years. Well, they don't look so crazy anymore. Now they look they were pretty smart. Michael Saylor, same thing. Michael Saylor was buying Bitcoin at $40,000, $50,000. It drops to 15,000. People are making fun of him. What does he do? He keeps buying more. So I think the lessons we can learn are, first of all, like, don't start your buying right in the middle of the euphoria. You need to buy the depression and sell the euphoria. Or if you're a long-term hodler, as they say, then you need to buy the depression and just hold, or just dollar cost average your way in over time. But El Salvador, I think we're going to look back and remember El Salvador as kind of a crypto crusader. They're the first country to come out and adopt it, and they won't be the last, and they will always have their place in history. And I think that Alabama has this opportunity. As far as I know, no state owns any Bitcoin. Alabama could be the first state to buy Bitcoin.
You guys could beat out Texas possibly. Well, will you beat out the federal government, you think, or will the Fed beat you guys to it?
So the Fed cheated because they seized Bitcoin. They seized 207,000 Bitcoin. So they already
Whoa.
Yeah. So as far as I know, the state of Alabama has not seized any Bitcoin through forfeitures or anything like that. Now, I guess technically the federal government did not buy Bitcoin, right? So you could say that they haven't bought it yet. So I guess if you want to make that technical distinction, but either way, I mean, they already own 1% of the world's Bitcoin supply, and they've been threatening to sell it, and they haven't done so. Thankfully, they haven't done so. And I think that's why you saw the night that Trump won the election, you saw Bitcoin jump from 68,000 to 75,000, was because people knew that Trump had said, we're going to establish the Bitcoin reserve and we're going to buy more. We're going to possibly buy as much as 4% more of the world's supply. And people think he's serious. I think he's going to follow through on it. And why not? Why wouldn't you? I think it helped Trump win the election, honestly.
Definitely. And this past Saturday, they released an article on Forbes saying that Trump confirmed that he will establish the Bitcoin strategic reserve at the federal level. And I appreciate your work and everything you're doing, by the way. Any last words you want to say before we get going? Because I know you're really busy and you have to get going to pass that Bitcoin's, help with legislation before the holidays, right? So they can have it ready to go in February. Any last words?
I would say to anybody watching, like, I'm going to be working to make sure Alabama's the first state to buy Bitcoin. You should be working to make sure your state's the first one to buy Bitcoin. And let's have like a friendly competition here. And I think sometimes you just got to get the ball rolling on stuff. It's like I referenced earlier the bill about exempting precious metals from sales tax. Well, Alabama was something like the 45th state to do it. So we finally came around and did it. But sometimes when other states are doing it and the idea kind of catches on, it's a lot easier to get your own state to do it. It's hard to be the first state to make a move on stuff, but the first state that does make the move is going to have a strategic advantage, and they're going to recruit more business and industry to their state. I really believe that.
Maybe I'll be moving to Alabama next year. With that being
Well,
said, thanks for your time, brother. Go ahead.
come see you in the auditor's office. We'd love to see you.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your time again. And with that being said, upwards and onwards.
See you later.